Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am continuing a series on my channel which is reading seasonally, or my seasonal reading vlogs, and this time we are going to explore the season of spring and what people recommend for spring reading. Even more so than fall, I feel like spring is the reading month where I have the least amount of books to recommend. Maybe I don't do as much reading in the spring, I don't know what it is. To me, I feel like it's a hard vibe to pinpoint in terms of reading, and when I look at my shelves, a lot of books are more definitively winter and summer, and then now I'm starting to understand fall, so I'm able to pinpoint those books as well. So when I think of spring, I think of words like fresh, romance, flowers, nature, baby animals, you know, kind of Eastery vibes, but like also warmth and softness. But here are some of the pieces of media that I think of when I think of spring. I think of Breath of the Wild, one of my favorite games. This came out, I believe, in spring. Oh, it's been so long now. You're foraging, you're running around in the woods, and that goes along with Animal Crossing New Horizons as well. Again, it was introduced in the spring. You got the beautiful cherry blossoms right when you started playing in Zipper. But other things I tend to think of are the Emma 2020 movie, as well as the 2005 Pride and Prejudice movie. Both have different seasons involved in it, but those movies just feel very spring to me. There's romance, there's softness, they're in the country. And my other big thing that I think of when I think of spring is shoujo anime. Shoujo anime is just very definitively spring to me. It's romance, at least the stuff I like. It's romance, it's soft, it's cute. Specifically, I think of like Kami-sama Kiss and Kimi no Todoke and like Fruit Basket and Cardcaptor Sakura. Like, they have different seasons in the shows themselves. Not all of them are soft, but there's just like a quality to shoujo romance and shoujo anime. The other anime I think of is March Comes In Like a Lion. Again, it has many seasons in it, but it has that title, March Comes In Like a Lion. The show isn't always soft. There's definitely some really emotional, deep moments, but it's such a beautiful anime. It's like watercolory and pastel-y, and there are these like moments of softness to it. So those are the types of things that I think of when I think of spring, and we are going to be using people's recommendations to figure out what are the spring vibes, what are the types of books people are recommending. But one thing I will say that I noticed right away during my research, one of the biggest descriptors that I was getting was cottagecore, and I actually started to look up cottagecore recommendation videos. It makes sense. Dark Academia is fall, cottagecore is spring. It's like polar opposites of each other, and so maybe this will turn a little bit into a cottagecore reading vlog, hopefully not too much. That I feel like is going to be the vibes of a lot of this, and it makes sense. Cottagecore, you got farm, you got living in the woods, foraging, flowers, prettiness, kind of return to like simpler times with like nature vibes. It makes sense for spring. When I said I didn't have any recommendations, I lied a little bit. I do have a couple. So starting off, like the movies, I feel like Austen is definitely a springtime author. Maybe not Northanger Abbey or Persuasion, but the rest of her work feels very definitively spring to me. Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Jane Austen has the springtime vibes. And then another author that I think of when I think of spring is Alice Oseman. Not just the Heartstopper series, I Was Born for This, Solitaire, Radio Silence, they have springy vibes. There are like darker and more emotional moments, but there's like, again, those pockets of softness. And then two recent reads that I think of when I think of spring is This Poison Heart, which has a character who uses nature, who's very in tune with nature, can help plants grow, and goes out into the woods. And then I also think of the last book I read, which is Ophelia After All, which takes place in prom season in a high school, and our main character is very much a romance girly, and she takes care of flowers. But for this reading vlog, I believe I compiled like 15 or 16 different videos, a couple from the same people, so definitely some repeat recommendations. But overall, spring was really interesting because, again, like fall, there was a return to a lot of videos on this topic, unlike winter, and there was also a lot of books. I think this is more books than I had in the fall time video, or maybe around the same number. So I got 116 different book recommendations, and I had a lot of repeats. But before we get into the books themselves, let's kind of discuss the word map and what kind of words people were associating with the season. I find this really interesting because not everybody prefaces the books they're recommending or like why they're recommending it. A lot of people just jump into the books themselves, but when people do go into depth about why they're picking the books that they're picking, a lot of times they use like buzzwords. And so again, for this research, the biggest word I was coming across was cottagecore. It makes sense. Cottagecore was a big thing in the last year or two. Not that it's gone away, but it was definitely like a big buzzword forward in the last year or two, which is where I try to get most of my research from. I try to stick to videos that were made in the past 2 years. I'm trying to pick from people that I recognize that I think I could enjoy something that they recommend, and I'm also trying to pick from a diverse set of readers. And unlike winter, I definitely had a much easier time finding this diverse set of readers. I felt like there was a lot more people recommending spring reads again, which made the pool of who I was picking from a lot better. So there are a couple of videos that are from a couple more years ago. I think the oldest one was from 5 years ago, but I tried to stick in the 1 to 2 year mark. But I am really happy with the amount of different types of readers I was able to pick from. But yes, cottagecore was the biggest buzzword we were seeing. Along with that, we had rebirth and sunshine, and then words like growth, nature, whimsical, magical, lush, flowers. So a lot of words like rejuvenation, regrowth, any kind of the world rebirthing, people rebirthing, that was a big theme that I kept seeing, along with a lot of nature words like flowers, sunshine, fresh, gardening, pastoral, flowers, a lot of that kind of stuff. But we were also seeing a lot of magical and fantastical words as well. Like fae was a really big one, fae and fairies. They feel very spring to me as well, so I really get where that's coming from. And some other words that we were seeing were romance, whimsical, magical, and lyrical, and pastels. And with these buzzwords, I can really see the recommendations taking shape and my understanding of the season taking shape. I feel like I'm really grounded in what spring looks like. So let us first get into all the books that were recommended that I have read before. Again, there were a lot of books, and honestly a lot of books that I've read, which is kind of cool. So I organized the books in this chart based on where they fit seasonally, if I think they were correct or not, and tried to make some type of order to it. So on our top left hand corner, we have the book that I think is the most definitively winter that was recommended. And then through that row to the top right hand corner is the book that I think is the most fall. So fall to winter is that first line. The second 2 lines are the books that were recommended that I think are more summery. And I tried to, again, organize it by the most summery in that top row, going down into this is summery, but it could be springy, maybe into spring summer vibes. And then the final row next to the flower is our 2 spring rows. So going into books that are like other seasons or summery, but I could see spring vibes for them, into the most spring vibes. So what do we got? The Bear and the Nightingale, that's a winter book. We know this. We've already talked about this in the winter reading vlog. Nevermore, I feel like is wintry fall. Dorian Gray was recommended a lot in the fall, and I feel like it's fallish. The Every Heart a Doorway series, I personally think is really fall, especially in An Absent Dream. With the Goblin Market, like I can feel the summer spring vibes that people are going for, but it feels more fall to me. There's that more darker edge to it. And then Strange the Dreamer, yeah, it's got the lyricism, but I feel like it's kind of more of a fall book. And then going into our summer books, Circe is just really definitively summer to me. Anything that's kind of Grecian, I feel like is summery. Maybe that's Percy Jackson with the summer camp vibes. Red, White, and Royal Blue, The Great Gatsby, Alex Approximately, Illuminae. Raybearer was recommended a couple times. I feel like those are all really summer books to me. Same with The Wrath and the Dawn, Carry On, My Brother's Husband, When the Mountain Meets the Moon, This Is How You Lose the Time War. Everything is getting more into that spring vibes, along with Hurricane Child, Mary Poppins, Mrs. Dalloway, and then The Cruel Prince. I feel like it's a really hard book to define. It can feel very fall, dark, fae-y, but again, spring vibes I feel like do fit into that fae, but it could also be summer. Like, I'm really strung up on this one. If we're going with like the fae stuff, yes, I guess it is a spring book, but when I think of like the pastoral springy vibes with more of an edge of darkness, I think of Deep Summer, which is like my own category that we will get to when we get to summer. But if people recommended The Cruel Prince for fall, I wouldn't necessarily discount that reasoning. It makes sense. But let us get into the spring books. So The House on the Cerulean Sea, I feel like this could go summery, it could go springy, it could go either way. Uprooted, again, I feel like I was seeing a lot of it in fall recommendations, and I believe there are more of a seasonal vibe to Uprooted, so I don't know. But it's hard. There's nature, there's magic. It feels like it's fitting into what we've established is spring. A Silent Voice series, yeah, I could see spring vibes for that. Alice in Wonderland, Heartstopper, The Penderwicks, Winnie the Pooh, Little Women. I was seeing a lot of these like children's classics, and I feel like it makes sense. Little Women, The Secret Garden, those really do make sense for spring. And then Edenbrook, yes, that makes sense for spring. The Regency romance era feels very spring vibes to me. And then we got Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. Howl's Moving Castle 2. I personally feel like Ghibli is very early summer into late summer vibes. The darker the tone of the story, the later into summer it gets. Howl's Moving Castle, the movie, maybe more on that early summer vibes. Howl's Moving Castle, the book, I personally read it in summer, so that's why I think I associate it with summer, but I could see it as a spring summer type book. Wild Beauty, yes, that fits into spring. The Poison Heart, again, like Wild Beauty, has that naturey magic. A Psalm for the Wild Built, definitively spring summer to me, yes. Anne of Green Gables and the Tea Dragon Society, the first book in the Tea Dragon Society specifically, those are springy books to me. And this is where the hard part comes in. It's very similar to fall winter. I feel like spring summer is really hard to separate from each other. For me, sci-fi tends to be more summer, more adventure-y stories tend to be more summer. I think more slice of life, more cozy, more a return to nature, return to the forest type vibes tend to be more spring. I wouldn't say they're cozy necessarily, but it's like sit out and have a picnic in the sun kind of cozy. So let's get into the books that were recommended the most for this reading vlog. The books that were recommended twice, we have Strange the Dreamer, Ray Bear, Daughter of the Forest, In an Absent Dream, The Bone Shard's Daughter, Wild Beauty, The Girl Who Drank the Moon, Act Your Age or the Brown Sisters series, Braiding Sweetgrass, and Heartstopper. The Daughter of the Forest is a book I've been interested in, and it definitely given the cottagecore vibes. Again, Ray Bear and Strange the Dreamer and In an Absent Dream I've read, and I don't necessarily think it's super springy, but Wild Beauty and Heartstopper, definitely I'm getting those springtime vibes from them. The other one I was really happy to see on this list, recommended twice, was Braiding Sweetgrass. This is a nonfiction, and I've been interested in it, and I feel, again, like foraging, nature, discussing plants and stuff definitely fits. I was really surprised to see how many nonfiction books were recommended by people, and I was really happy and excited about that because so far we haven't seen any nonfiction. And then getting into the books that were recommended more than twice, we have Howl's Moving Castle, which was actually recommended a whopping 6 times. Again, this might have been a couple by the same person, but a bunch of people were recommending Howl's Moving Castle. I have read that. I would love to reread it. We can save that for another time. The other book I saw recommended, I believe 3 times, was The Inheritance of Orchida Divina, and we are seeing Uprooted and The House on the Cerulean Sea recommended more than twice. Is one of the reasons why it really pushed me to put those on the spring reading section of the books I've already read, just because, again, they were being recommended so often. Uprooted was recommended 3 times, and House on the Cerulean Sea was recommended 5 times. A lot of the videos I was taking from was the year of The House on the Cerulean Sea, so it makes sense. And while I personally didn't love it, it does have that softness, that naturey vibes, the kind of isolation a little bit that feels like spring, so I get it. So let's get into the books that I picked for the recommendation list. So I had to pick something that was recommended more than twice, so I picked The Inheritance of Orchida Divina, The Daughter of the Forest, and Braiding Sweetgrass, all that I've said I've been interested in. And then for books that were recommended more than once, again, I have the Sisters Brown trilogy. And from there, I was really boiling down the kind of vibes that we were seeing throughout the research I was doing. A lot of it was fantasy, there was some romance, there were a couple graphic novels in there as well, and again, there were some nature-based nonfiction. So I really tried to take those kind of stats and apply them to the other books that I picked from the reading list. So I picked Pilu of the Woods and The Sprite Gardener, or Sprite and the Gardener, as my 2 graphic novel choices. For some more romancy vibes, I have Half a Soul, which is also magical, and the Sister Brown trilogy again. And then for my other fantastical things, I picked Ash, A River Enchanted, Baker's Magic was one that was only recommended once but sounded very intriguing. And then again, I have my nonfictions with Braiding Sweetgrass and The Botany of Desire. And the only book that I have on this list that was added by me that was not recommended was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. And so this is a new book that just came out. I don't believe that there were any spring videos from this year except maybe one. So this one did not have a chance to get onto the cottagecore reading recommendation videos, but I feel like it fits the vibes vibes, and it is a book that I'm really excited about. But since I've been prepping this video for a while, I can get into what I actually ended up picking and do a little haul for you. So the first book I ended up picking was Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is a book I already owned. I bought it, I believe, at the end of last year, beginning of this year. It's a fantasy, but with like a Regency romance inspired kind of vibe to it. It has like girl cursed, has to try and figure out a way out of it, Ella Enchanted type vibes. So I was really interested in this and the entire series, and I'm really hoping I like it. I have a little bit of a weakness for Regency romance, and there's a lot I don't love about the genre, particularly like how straight it is and like how weird it is about gender, but also it's like my guilty pleasure, you know? Like, I never talk about the books I read for Regency, but every once in a while I get the inkling and I just download a book and read it. So I'm hoping this can fit those vibes that I'm looking for that. The next book I picked up, again, I had to pick up one of the ones that was recommended more than once, and I picked up The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina. I actually got the paperback edition. I actually love both the hardcover and the paperback, but I don't know, something about like the gold in this. I love the typography, but this wasn't one that I was previously super interested in. Like, it was not at the top of my reading list, but seeing it recommended so often, I was interested enough to read it. So I know that there is like a woman who's magically connected to like tree or plants of some kind. She is an older woman about to pass on, and so she's like talking to her generations of family, something, I don't know, we'll figure it out. But it's adult fantasy, as is this one. And then the next books I picked up are, I have Pilu of the Woods by Maya K. Nguyen, and this is again that graphic novel. It's probably fantasy, but if you look in the back, oh look, there's Kay O'Neill's books. Perfect springtime vibes in this. Really excited about this one. And then the next pick I have is Breeding Sweetgrass. I was really interested in those nonfiction books, and I just was really excited to see this one on the list. It's kind of one that I see at my store that I work at a lot, and so I was intrigued by it. And so I've read a little bit of this so I can talk about it a little bit more. Basically, as the subtitle says, an Indigenous woman's scientific knowledge and the teaching of plants. So it's part memoir, part science stuff, part Indigenous knowledge, discussing plants that our author Robin Wall Kimmer has interacted with. And what's really fun about this is that she actually works on the campus that was on my college campus. Like, she works at SUNY, the SUNY that is on the Syracuse campus. She published this book right before I actually went to school there. So I just think it's like a really funny coincidence that I was there, she was teaching there. She probably did signings and talks with this book, and I just, you know, was a freshman in architecture, so I never interacted with anything outside of architecture. So I probably missed a lot of good stuff that she was doing back then, but it's kind of fun, interesting that, you know, she was like right next door to me. And along with that, a lot of the plants and nature and stuff that she's talking about is from that area, which I love learning more about, like the upstate New York area and the wildlife there and the indigenous communities there. So this is going to be really interesting. And then the last book I do not have yet, but it is going to be Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia. It's a book that I've been super interested in, and I bought it on Pango in the beautiful UK edition, so I'm really excited. I'm hoping I like it. You know, there's like field guide, naturey stuff, I think, because she's like compiling or researching something, and there's like a evil dark fae man. But yeah, let us get into reading, starting with Sweetgrass. So since it's spring, I decided I would do some extra spring cleaning. My room needs to be clean anyway, so let's do some extra cleaning. Maybe even go through my closet a little bit today. And I'm going to be doing that while I continue to listen to Braiding Sweetgrass. Yes, my pillows are nasty. I will eventually do that whole laundry strip situation with them, but I'm not gonna buy new pillows. That is not me. I like flat pillows. I don't even sleep with a pillow. I sleep without a pillow on my face. Yes, they are nasty. They need to be cleaned. I do not believe the whole thing about getting new pillows. No, these pillows are perfectly shaped to the way I like them. So yeah, just ignore the nasty pillows. So it is almost noon on April 11th. Even though it's noon, I'm going to try and make the most of my day off today. That will, one, be consisting of laundry, and two, hopefully being really focused on reading. It feels like I haven't started this reading vlog. Basically, so far, I've been reading Braiding Sweetgrass. I'm definitely more than halfway through it, and I'm really enjoying it, especially through the audiobook. Like, this is something that has to be savored. It's something that you want to space out because it is a nonfiction that's personally just like how I like to read those kind of things, so that I can really absorb each story and discussion. And I'm really liking this. The balance between like the scientific stuff with her memoir type things and the indigenous knowledge is just really interesting to me. It just like hits on a lot of things that I've always been like very much into, like survival, foraging, like woods. I definitely always wanted to be like a woods kid growing up, and I like the biology and the botany stuff in there as well. It's definitely in my area of science that I enjoy. But the problem, or not the problem, but the issue with me starting this reading vlog is I haven't been reading any other books because my audiobook for the Assassin's Quest came in, and I currently use Overdrive, which is being overturned or discontinued at the end of the month, which is fine because I can sign up for Libby through my library as well. I personally think Overdrive is a lot more intuitive to use as a person. So anyway, I've been listening to the audiobook for Assassin's Quest, and this is a chunky book, so this has really been sucking up my time, and like I'm enjoying it, but I'm okay putting this to the side for a little bit and enjoying some of the other books I want to read this month. So like currently I have Braiding Sweetgrass on loan, Assassin's Quest, and I also put on loan at the library The Inheritance of Orchida Divina. I would like to at least start on the audiobook of that, just so at least I can get all the correct pronunciations of like the names and stuff, because I know I'm probably gonna mess that up. But anyway, to be productive this day, I kind of want to use like the cottagecore slice of life aesthetic for today, I guess. Kind of how I think of spring cottagecore. It's like slice of lifey. I'm gonna do some laundry, get some tasks done, live in the simple life, and also get some reading done. So I finally got the rest of my books in. I think you've seen most of these, but I also got in Emily Wilde's. I actually got this from Pango, and I was really surprised and happy to see it there for a very normal price, and the shipping was a lot quicker than if I had to buy it from the UK. So yeah, I'm really excited about that, and this finishes out what I need for this reading vlog. But yeah, I'm excited to read everything, honestly. I kind of want to hold off on this one because it'll be a good breather. Today I would like to get a big chunk out of my reading done somehow. My attention span has been very sucky for the past 3 years, so I feel like once I could have probably read this in a day and no more, you know, like that is not who I am anymore. But we're gonna try and channel younger me, making this a slightly technology-free day. Basically that means is that I can take breaks on my Switch or on my phone, but no TikTok is allowed. You know, I started this morning off slow. I spent a lot of time on TikTok, all of that. So, you know, it's out of my system. If I go on my phone, I can play a game, I can watch YouTube, but no TikTok today. So what I'm going to do now to pick what I'm going to read is I'm gonna do a little online wheel selection thing because I don't know what I want, and this is the best way to figure it out. And of course, when the first thing I open when I open my iPad is the drawing I'm doing of Fit Chivalry from Assassin's Quest. I'm actually kind of obsessed with this. I don't know if the color is coming off right on camera. I think he's coming off a lot lighter than I drew him, but I think it turned out okay. So let's spin and see what the wheel chooses for us. And it has chosen The Inheritance. So I was kind of looking forward to Half a Soul and Emily Wilde because I think there's a little bit of romance in there, and I guess I'm kind of feeling in that mood. But we will start with Orchida Divina, and I will listen to the first chapter at least through audiobook just to get down some of the names and pronunciations, hopefully. 322 pages. So if I really hunkered down, I feel like it is possible to read this today. So let's get started on the laundry and then we can get started on the book. So it is 7:30 now, and I did okay throughout the beginning of the day. I started trying to read it physically after I had listened to the first chapter, and I immediately was like, oh my god, I'm gonna fall asleep. So I switched back to the audiobook. I'm really struggling to find something to keep my focus to do while listening to an audiobook, but I'm 128 pages into it, so I'm not slacking. I don't think I'm gonna finish this tonight at that pace, but for reading it for a couple hours and having dinner and a hour-long phone call in between,
between that. So like basically 2-3 hours spent not reading. I think I did okay. And so far this book, it's like you are learning about these different family members as they receive invitations for their grandmother's funeral. So they go to their ancestral house. There's definitely like some bad blood between their grandmother and maybe some of the family members, and it's kind of their grandma giving them their inheritance, and I think more things are going to spiral out from getting their inheritance. And then also there seems to be some kind of big bad that the grandma has made a deal with or something. I like it so far, but I definitely feel like there were elements missing. I know it's probably supposed to be like more of a reveal later on about like what happened between the family, why is there bad blood and everything, but I would have liked like a little more build up, a little more tension. I definitely like a couple of the narrator slash what feel like more of the secondary characters, but the initial character that we meet, which feels like the main character, felt like I'm losing a lot of personality from her. I wish like the setup there had been more for her. Like overall it's really good. The writing is really beautiful. I like that it's like slower, that it's character focused. I like the magical realism speculative element to this, and I am saying magical realism because this is a Latin American character. The grandmother is from Ecuador. What's interesting to me is that the beginning of the novel really felt like this could be a novella. This could be a short story. For me, that makes me feel like I'm feeling like it's not entirely fleshed out to be its own novel, so I'm just kind of waiting for more stuff to occur. But is it spring? Is it fitting the springtime vibes? Yes, definitely. There's a lot of nature imagery, especially as this like magical event is happening to the grandmother who's going to be passing away. The magic itself is very whimsical-y, and the story also has this air of like slice of life, slower paced. Like the characters have just kind of come to accept that these things happen to the grandmother, and so it does feel like a very slice of life family coming together, enjoying food with each other and just like enjoying the last moments that they have together, which definitely feels very spring to me. So yeah, I'm going to now go in the bathtub and put my phone on the charger, and I'm hoping that will help me stay focused so I can maybe bust through like 50 pages of this if I really go at it, but we will see. So it is the next day, but I wanted to check in with this and my little reading sprints, I guess, that I did. So basically, I mean, I did stop at some point last night and started watching anime instead. I got to about 245 pages of this, and this book is like 320-ish pages of this, so I did pretty good if you look at that. I didn't finish it. I definitely could have if I'd started earlier, I think. Just gonna enjoy the rest of this today and finish it up. I do have a full day of work today though, and tomorrow, so I'm gonna be pretty tired. The back half of this novel is really interesting because a lot more of like the flashbacks to the grandmother's past are coming into play with like the danger that the new generation is facing. Yeah, it's a really interesting novel. I can't think of anything else that it's like kind of similar to. It very much feels unique, I guess. Yeah, I will continue to read it. So it is a couple days later and it is my next day off. I made it through, so yay. But in that time, I was continuing to read Braiding Sweetgrass, really enjoying it. I think I have maybe 100 pages, maybe a little less than that. I also finished The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina, and I believe I talked a little bit about this. Part magical realism, part generational story, part like myths and legends being like reinvented to tell this story. Really hard to describe because I feel like I personally haven't read anything like it. It's like a lot of different parts of different things that I've read combined into something else with its like own noticeable things that make it stand out as like its own thing. And so this was just very much a ride. It was a lot happening at once and a lot of it is not explained, which personally I feel like it makes sense. I didn't need the magic explained. It is very much magical realism. Magic happening in the real world, connected to real events that are happening to the characters and kind of told in like a no nonsense, like this is just the way it is kind of vibe. And all the characters just accepting it as part of the landscape around them. I feel like it worked, but for me, I didn't need explanations of the magic, but I felt like I wanted the magic or the events that were happening to feel more connected. It's hard because everything in the story is connected. We were just getting so much plot thrown at us, so many different things that I just kind of felt like it was washing over me, and I had a sense of like, wait, why do the characters think to do this thing? Why do they know that that will solve one of the problems? How do the characters know to go there? How do the characters know to do this? Like, that's a lot of what I was feeling. There was just so much happening that I was kind of getting lost in the reasonings for why stuff was happening and why characters were doing that. The two storylines are really separated from each other. The story of Akita Divina and then the contemporary story of what's happening to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And so since the characters don't know Okita Davina's story until the end of the novel, it just had me like questioning like, wait, why do they know that? Blah, blah, blah. I don't think the author made any mistakes with like continuity stuff, but it just kind of felt like that. And I feel like this story incorporates a lot of stuff that I really like with like magical contemporary stories, like a sense of like coincidences and like magical happenstance kind of things, connecting all the different storylines together, a past and present that are really interconnected with each other, fixing mistakes of the past coming back to haunt, and that kind of stuff. But again, there were a lot of characters, we were switching POVs, there was a lot happening. The threads of the story just didn't feel like they fully came together for me. So I'm gonna give this like a 3 stars, maybe a 3.5. I think it's a very solid read, a good adult fantasy novel, but it just wasn't a new favorite of mine. I did feel like there were some storytelling craft problems. Maybe if the story was longer, maybe if it was edited longer. The writing was beautiful, the story I liked, something was missing for me personally. But I would recommend this for fans of like lyrical writing, who love fairy tales, who love magical stories. It does feel like it's very much its own thing, which I really appreciate. It does feel really different while still feeling familiar in a way. And is this a good spring read? Is this a good recommendation? I feel so. It has a touch of little bit of darker moments, but the fairy tale aspect, the whimsical aspect, the magic, and especially like a lot of the floral and land nature based magic, it definitely feels like it's fitting into what I would want for a spring read. And for me, spring summer is definitely more action adventure based, and spring is just like the softer version of what I would want in a summer book. So this definitely fits into that. It's not hardcore magic systems, it's not hardcore plot story, it has that character depth in it, and there is like a soft gentleness of this family coming together that really makes it feel like a great recommendation for spring. So yes, 3 out of 5 stars for enjoyment and craft and all that, but for spring elements, I would say 4.5, 4 stars out of 5. It's hard to give it that 5 stars because it wasn't the perfect read for me, but it definitely fits into the spring vibes. So what am I reading next? I'm still gonna continue to read Braiding Sweetgrass, but since it's my day off, this is the perfect day to go into one of these and get pretty far into it, like I did with Orchidea Divina. Honestly, both of these really intrigue me, and I'm not leaning towards one or the other, so I'm gonna do another wheel to decide. And the wheel has picked Half a Soul for me, so that's what we are gonna start on first. I'm really excited for this. I think it's very heavy romance based, and it's Regency with a fantasy twist, so yes, that is going to be perfect for me. Finished Breath of the Wild, but I think there are some other stuff I'm going to play in it. And I also just released my new themed reading vlog, so that's fun. So I meant to check in yesterday, but I didn't. I flew through this thing. I finished it in a day. I started about 2 p.m. and was reading it off and on throughout the day until maybe 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then I was just like speed reading through the end of this. This is like an adult Regency fantasy romance. That's like the best way to describe it. The Napoleonic Wars have just ended, so we are set in our world, but they're also fae creatures and magic and curses. And so our main character, when she was very young, she kind of got on the wrong side of a Fey Lord, Elfin Lord, I think. Basically, she was cursed and she has half a soul. She doesn't feel a lot of emotions and things just don't affect her the same way. And I would say this is like in the same realm as Ella Enchanted or Housewarming Castle, but adult, and it is very much based on the fantasy romance aspect, much more so on the romance. Basically, her and her cousin, when they come of age and are debuting into society, they go into London, and her cousin has a master plan of getting introduced to the sorcerer, or the Lord Sorcerer, the King Sorcerer, basically, and being like, hey, my cousin has this weird curse, can you fix it? And it's very much a like grumpy man with a nonchalant woman. I really like that dynamic. I personally only like grumpy sunshine when it's the woman in the relationship who's grumpy. I'm not super into like Sunshine Woman a lot. I like grumpy men as characters, but I don't know. I don't like when Sunshine grumpy dynamic is woman Sunshine, man grumpy. I can get on board with it, but it's not my favorite. I like when we have a grumpy antagonistic woman, and this is a really great new version of the grumpy Sunshine because it's like man very grumpy but heart of gold, and woman just like very nonchalant, does not care. She definitely like puts him in his place and stuff, and like I wouldn't say improves him, but like, you know, kind of tells it to him straight and makes him like a better person, but like not in a sunshine way, which I really, really like. This is really short. So the characters get introduced to each other really quickly and their romantic feelings for each other sprout pretty quickly. There are a couple scenes before we get into the like oh feeling, but I wish there was like a little bit more. I could have used a little bit more of a slow burn. I absolutely did fall in love with these characters. I liked the magical plague element, more plot-based stuff in between the romance. I felt like that gave the story a really good base, so it wasn't just like a romance with a flimsy plot behind it. It was whimsical, it was charming, it was really fun. The only thing I would say is that this book, the like major themes and stuff revolve around pointing out the classism of this time period and like the social inequalities. Because we're set in England and, you know, we're talking about deeper, darker stuff that is going on during that time period, it has me wondering, is there still slavery in the Americas? Is there still colonialism, imperialism? Is the British Empire doing those things? Has it been affected by the addition of magic in this world? I don't know, because it never talks about it. I feel like the author probably did that purposely so that she didn't like tread on any toes, but like if you're gonna set it in this time period and be a little more socially conscious, like it has me wondering, like, you know, are these things going on? I could definitely see our character as like an abolitionist or a women's rights activist, so like you could have added that into the story. And I was really worried how the curse would be handled in this story, especially as it deals with like disability and also sexuality and aromanticism. I was very pleasantly surprised how this book dealt with ableism. I think the way that the curse was resolved was really well done, and it made me really happy. That's the way I wanted it to go. And then my last thing I didn't love was the epilogue. It was like very neat, tying up all the loose strings, and it like really fast forwards and tells us every small detail of these characters' lives. I personally didn't need that. I like happily ever after, and I just can make up what happens. But overall, again, this was cute. I loved the characters. I liked the side characters. I liked the problems that the characters were dealing with. I just wanted to be longer because I really did fall in love with these characters and I thought the world was interesting. So first off, this is a 4 out of 5 star read for me, but is it a spring novel? I would say yes. This is exactly what I was looking for. It's whimsical, it's magical, but it is also romantic, it's sweet. There are those darker moments and discussions, but overall it's very hopeful, very light and fun. I feel like this encompasses what I'm looking for in a spring book. Unlike The Inheritance of Orquídea de Vida, there wasn't as much discussion of like nature elements, there wasn't as much like magical wood stuff, so I don't feel like it could be a 5 out of 5 stars in terms of like atmosphere, but like tone-wise, this is very spring. So like a 4 out of 5 stars. It's not quite cottagecore, but it is very much in the vein of a spring book in terms of tone again. So we have 2 books read and I have 3 books left. Again, I'm continuing to read this, really enjoying it. Almost done actually. This has probably been like the most engaging nonfiction that I've read, and that's mainly because I read a lot of more like social cultural nonfiction when I'm reading nonfiction, but I need to definitely pick up more stuff like this where it's about foraging and forest stuff and just like other stuff that I'm interested in and not just like the betterment of myself, because this was again really engaging and I'm really flying through it. And then for our next 2 books, we have Emily Wilde and Pulu of the Woods. I'm hoping this is like half a soul energy, but more woodsy, more witchy, and I'm hoping this is like Tea Dragon Society cute charmingness. So I think I'm gonna I'm gonna have lunch, but I think I'm gonna read this and then start in on this. So I will let you know how it goes.
So it hasn't been too long since I updated, but I feel like a lot has happened in that time. Since finishing Half a Soul, I picked up Pilu of the Woods. This is a middle grade graphic novel, and it's basically a very, very short story about this young kid's encounter with this forest spirit, them dealing with their own feelings of grief while interacting with this forest spirit, who's also dealing with their own problems. It's very cute. I like the illustration style. Everything came together at the end, but I definitely felt like there were some parts that were like a little bit confusing, especially with how like it laid things out. Sometimes it wasn't like chronological, but overall this was cute. It was sweet. I think it told a really good story in a very short amount of space, but it was short. So I'm giving it like a 3.25 stars. I would recommend this. It was really, again, nice. It was well done, but it's not my favorite graphic novel, and it's just hard to be that when it's so short. And then after that, I decided to pick up Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairy because this is, of course, one of the last books I have to read on my reading vlog. I'm about halfway through it. I'm enjoying it, but I do have some mixed opinions on certain things of it. Halfway through, I've realized that this book has disqualified itself from this reading vlog. I wanted to hold on because it's got the witchiness, it's got the foresty aspect, it's got a lot of the things that are making me think of spring reading, but the atmosphere of this book, the setting of this book, it's winter. They are basically really close to the Arctic on like a small island near Norway, looking for these very elusive fae, and winter is coming. That's when the fae come out, so it's basically taking place on a small isolated island in the middle of winter with a lot of like snowy, scenic imagery, and as much as I want that to be the vibe, this is becoming a wintry read and I can't ignore it. I'm going to continue reading it, but it is not going to be included in this reading vlog any further because it is definitely not a spring vlog, but that's fine because I've read so far 3 really great books that do fit into spring. This is like a 5 out of 5 spring book, and these were like 4 out of 5 spring books. So I'm instead going to focus my time on finishing my last read, which is going to be Braiding Sweetgrass. I have less than 50 pages of this book left to read, so I'm just going to spend my time finishing up this and then we can discuss it more. This book takes place over a lot of different seasons, some of them being winter, but I feel like the hopeful nature of this nonfiction and like what it's discussing, it definitely leans more into the spring season for me personally. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I think it's really funny because Hank Green just put up a video on Vlogbrothers about lichen, and I had literally just finished the lichen chapter that day, so that was really coincidental and fun. But yeah, I'm just gonna finish up this book and then I guess we're gonna finish up this reading vlog. So we have reached the end of the vlog and now we can discuss spring reading. So let's start with our DNF. Deceptively a spring book, maybe the tone of a spring book. It's adult fantasy, it has like a little bit of romance possibly in it. It has like the nature as well as the fae stuff, but atmosphere, setting, it is important. And I don't think anybody is really going to recommend this for spring because it takes place in a winter setting with a very wintry story with winter fae. And then let's go into the other books. So we have one book that was recommended once, I believe, another book that was recommended once, a book that was recommended 2 times, and a book that was recommended 3 or 4 times. And all of these that were recommended ended up being very spring books. We have a middle grade graphic novel with a contemporary setting and some fantasy stuff, very woodsy, so thus very springy. Also, maybe a story of regrowth, regeneration, that fit into some of the buzzwords. We have an adult fantasy romance book. Again, love, fresh beginnings, new starts, that fits into spring, as well as just like the light airiness, something cute, fun. And then we have a magical realism fantasy adult novel with a little bit of a darker tone than the last one for sure, but a lot of nature magic, a lot of nature imagery, so very much fitting into spring. And then our final novel was a nonfiction, which is a new genre for our seasonal recommendations. It is based in foraging, based in environmentalism, based in indigenous knowledge. It's about not only just the planet, but plants, the world, environment, so it very much fits into the kind of things we're looking for spring. And I just finished this, so I will talk about it a little bit more. I think I pretty much explained everything about this, but it's basically like different chapters are about different plants or different environmental issues or different teachings. And this was amazing. I have to give it 5 out of 5 stars. Really hopeful, really enjoyable, but it also again talks about a lot of really important issues like conservation and environmentalism. And this is a great book for spring, but just in general, highly recommend this. This was like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Really cute, really fun. If you're looking for something in the same vein as Tea Dragon Society, maybe to pick this one up. This was like a 3.25, 3 out of 5 stars. There was a lot that I really enjoyed in here. I would definitely check out this author again because I did really enjoy their writing. It didn't quite come together all the way that I wanted it to, but overall, if you're looking for nature-based magic, this is definitely a good contender. And then Half a Soul ended up being one of my favorite novels It was really easy to breeze through, really enjoyable, but it didn't shy away from talking about different issues as well, while still having like fun and magic and fantasy elements and coming of age elements. It definitely feels like a good spring read in that it has that coming of age-ness as well as romance and all of that. So yes, do people understand spring reading? I think they do. I think people are good at recommending books. In a lot of ways, spring is like the antithesis to fall. So we are looking for light, we are looking for regrowth, less of the darker, less of the isolation. We're going into more stories of family, of stories of love. There's probably more romance in genres. And I think like the biggest buzzword we've come across is going to be cottagecore. That is what we're looking for, at least for me, what I'm looking for a spring read now. Something with nature, foraging, something with the natural world, something fantastical and whimsical, something that maybe even harkens back to olden times without seeming to have olden values, I would say. So let me see if I can round up some spring reads, or what I think of as a spring read now that I've completed this. So I was definitely trying to find the most nature-based fantasy that I could, and definitely I feel like that's something that's missing from my shelves and something I'm going to be looking for in the future. I love apothecary, I love witchy vibes, I love nature-based magic, foraging, all of that. So hopefully there's stuff that exists out there that we can find, that I can read, but hopefully it's something that I feel like will be created in the future as well. I know that there is like a cottagecore fantasy book that came out this year called Flower Heart, I believe. But as far as stuff that I scrounged up from my shelves, of course we have the Poison Heart, which I discussed, which has that apothecary, witchy vibes. Wild Beauty, another garden, very lyrical, magical realism type book. Girl Serpent Thorn, this book has a very fairy tale aspect to it, and I believe she has like a magic garden, or she takes care of plants, so that's in there. As far as like romance or more contemporary leaning stuff, we have Ophelia After All. I personally feel like a lot of contemporary books lean more summer, just because that's when I read a lot of them, but definitely a lot of them probably have spring vibes as well. But this is the one I immediately think of because I just read it, and she has a rose garden. If we're looking for adult fantasy romance, something kind of in between Orchina Divina and Half a Soul, I think of The Beautiful Ones. This has like drama, it has fantasy, it has romance, very soap opera-y. Not a lot of nature-based stuff, but I feel like it definitely fits into the vibes that we're looking for. And then the other thing I think of a lot of when I think of spring now is children's classics. Adult classics tend to be a lot darker, but children's classics, a lot of them have children that are like wood children that run around in the woods. So of course we have like The Secret Garden and Anne of Green Gables. These are like my immediate go-tos, but I know there are other ones as well. So I feel like that's kind of the vibe of spring reading. It's magical, it's whimsical, it's nature-based. We're getting mostly fantasy, but also a little bit of romance in there, maybe as a subcategory. And nonfiction seems to be a big contender, especially because we're talking about regrowth, which also happens within ourselves. So yes, the spring reading vlog coming to an end. This was like really fun and refreshing, honestly. It was nice to get away from some of the darker stuff that we'd been seeing in the earlier fall and winter vlog, and I feel like this is like a genre I'm definitely going to be looking out for more. I want more nature-based, like I said. I want more small stories about just like little witches in the woods being cute little witches and little apothecaries and stuff. And honestly, I might even have my own little story that I'm thinking up in my brain, which I think would be really fun to write. But yes, I think that's going to do it for the spring reading vlog. Let me know what books you think of when you think of spring reading. Let me know your recommendations, especially if you have like that kind of fantasy book that I'm looking for, kind of cottagecore fantasy book. But yes, I had such a fun time filming this, so thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.